Imagine a world where the sky remained untouched by human hands, where the dream of flight never left the ground. In 1903, Orville and Wilbur Wright made history at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, taking humanity's first powered flight. But what if they had failed? What if their fragile machine had crashed, their spirits broken, and the world had been forced to wait decades longer for flight? The consequences would ripple across every corner of society, reshaping technology, war, and even the pace of globalization. Without the Wright brothers' success, early aviation might have been delayed by decades. Experimenters like Alberto Santos Dumont or Glenn Curtiss could have eventually succeeded, but their breakthroughs would have emerged in a very different world. Imagine the First World War unfolding without airplanes. Battles would have been fought entirely on land and sea. Intelligence gathering from the sky, dogfights above trenches, and air raids would be unimaginable. Entire strategies and outcomes could have shifted dramatically. The war might have dragged on longer, claiming even more lives, because armies lacked the advantage of air reconnaissance. Civil aviation, too, would lag behind. Airlines as we know them might not appear until the mid-1930s or later. Crossing the Atlantic could still be a dangerous weeks-long journey by ship. Trade, commerce, and tourism would remain local and regional, slowing cultural exchange between continents. The age of global business expansion, where goods, ideas, and people moved quickly across borders, would be postponed. Entire industries reliant on rapid transportation from international finance to global entertainment would evolve far more slowly. Technology itself would suffer. Airplanes were not just machines, they were catalysts for innovation. Materials like lightweight metals, early aerodynamics, research, and engine technologies that today power not only aircraft but cars, rockets, and satellites might have developed at a much slower pace. Without the Wright brothers' flight, there's a strong chance rocketry and space exploration could be delayed by decades. Landing on the moon in 1969, perhaps that dream would have had to wait until the late 20th century, if not longer. The cultural impact would be profound, too. Flight symbolizes freedom, progress, and the limitless potential of human invention. Without the Wright brothers, humanity's imagination would have faced a ceiling. Writers, filmmakers, and artists inspired by aviation might have never dared to dream of the skies. The romance of air travel, the thrill of breaking boundaries, and the iconic images of early aviators risking everything would remain stories of what could have been, not history as we know it. Yet human curiosity is persistent. Even if the Wright brothers failed, someone else, somewhere, would eventually conquer the air. But the timeline changes everything. By the 1920s and 1930s, Europe and America would still be industrializing without aviation, perhaps giving other nations an unexpected lead in transportation technology. Imagine a scenario where Germany, Japan, or even the Soviet Union leapfrogs ahead, developing advanced aircraft decades before the United States catches up. The balance of power in global conflicts, trade, and colonization could look very different. Even everyday life would feel the absence of flight. Airmail would be impossible, delaying communication across continents. Emergency medical transport, humanitarian aid, and global disaster response would all be constrained. Families separated by oceans would remain isolated longer. The world, in every sense, would feel bigger, slower, and less connected. Now, imagine the human reaction to such a delay. Would the public lose faith in technological progress, or would the failure of the Wright brothers fuel even greater determination? History has a way of balancing itself, but the human cost, both in terms of lost innovation and lost lives, would be staggering. And this is just the first ripple in a series of consequences that would redefine the 20th century. If you've ever wondered how fragile the thread of history can be, how a single invention or its failure can alter the course of the world, you're about to find out. Stick around, because in part 2, we'll explore the shocking alternate reality of a 20th century where flight never took off, and how that would change war, exploration, and even your everyday life. And while you're here, make sure you hit subscribe, because uncovering these what-ifs is only the beginning, and you won't want to miss what comes next. The deeper you travel into this alternate timeline, the more you begin to feel the weight of a world grounded. By the mid-20th century, the absence of aviation reshapes every major event, every nation, and every technological frontier. Industries that once relied on rapid mobility now struggle under the slow march of ocean liners and long-distance railroads. The 20th century becomes a world defined not by speed, but by delay. World War II unfolds under an entirely different sky. Without aircraft, long-range bombing never becomes part of military strategy. The Blitz over London never happens. Pearl Harbor is not attacked from above. Naval warfare becomes the defining force, turning oceans into the primary battlegrounds. Aircraft carriers never exist. Instead, super battleships dominate. Massive steel giants roaming the seas, each one carrying the ambitions of empires. The United States, without aerial dominance, enters the conflict with a weaker technological edge. Intelligence moves slowly, limited by ground scouts and radio intercepts. Paratroopers, reconnaissance flights, and air support never become part of the Allied toolkit. The war lasts longer, grinding on through brutal land campaigns that take a devastating toll on soldiers and civilians alike. Victory is still possible, but the cost is far higher, and the world that emerges afterward is far more fractured. Once the war ends, the era we know as the Jet Age simply never arrives. There are no commercial airlines forming global networks. The idea of a city like Los Angeles turning into an international hub fades. Tourism stays intensely local. The average person grows up knowing their country deeply, but the rest of the world only through books, newspapers, and the rare traveler willing to spend weeks crossing oceans. Major American cities develop differently. Without airports drawing new populations, economic migration slows. Silicon Valley may never take shape in the same way. Tech companies that depended on global talent pools expand far more gradually. Even Hollywood's global influence weakens, because international audiences cannot easily travel to share ideas, trends, and cultural exchanges. Scientific progress loses one of its most powerful engines. Aviation didn't just create flight, it created a mindset. Innovation thrives when people see bold ideas become real, and without the Wright brothers' success, the belief that impossible things are within reach begins to dim. Research in engineering, physics, propulsion, and materials science drifts without direction. Space exploration becomes a distant dream, not an urgent pursuit. Humanity might not reach orbit until the early 2000s, and landing on the moon could be a goal for future generations, not the past. Global crises become harder to respond to. Without aircraft, humanitarian aid crawls across continents. Natural disasters, droughts, and pandemics stretch logistical systems to their limits. Entire regions suffer simply because the world cannot move fast enough to help. Even medical evacuations, organ transport, and emergency supply drops are impossible. Geography becomes destiny again, and millions of lives are shaped by the simple fact that help cannot fly. But perhaps the most surprising consequence lies in culture. Without the romance of aviation, without pilots pushing the limits of human capability, a certain kind of hero disappears from history. There is no Charles Lindbergh crossing the Atlantic, no Amelia Earhart inspiring generations, no images of brave crews soaring through storms. A century defined by courage in the open sky becomes a century bound to the ground. Yet, as history has always shown, human curiosity eventually breaks through. By the late 20th or even early 21st century, renewed attempts at powered flight begin to surface. Prototypes appear in small workshops, university labs, or garages, where young inventors refuse to accept the limits of their era. But their breakthroughs come in a world already transformed. Instead of leading the modern age, flight becomes a late invention, something that arrives in a hyper-connected digital world, but a physically slow one. Its impact is still revolutionary, but far less central than in our real timeline. Imagine living today in that world. A flight ticket would be a miracle, not a convenience. Seeing another country from above would feel like witnessing the future. Airports would be rare. Experimental centers and early aircraft would be viewed the way we now view rockets: advanced, powerful, and slightly dangerous. The first commercial flights would sell out instantly, not because they save time, but because they represent a dream finally coming true. And that's the hidden truth behind this entire alternate history. When one invention fails, the world does not stop. It simply detours. Every path becomes longer, every discovery delayed, but curiosity keeps pushing forward. The Wright brothers didn't just give us flight, they gave us momentum. Without them, the 20th century becomes slower, heavier, and more isolated. But eventually, someone finds a way to lift humanity back into the sky. If you want to explore more worlds like this one, where a single moment in history transforms everything we know, make sure you subscribe. Your support helps us continue diving deep into the stories that shaped our world and the worlds that might have been.